we will present an exciting lineup of events over the next 3 days for all of you. 3 years after the COVID-19 pandemic started, sending shockwaves globally and practically shutting down the world, we are grateful to be back in person this year. AED this year will focus on Asia and the emerging world order. To launch the Asia Economic Dialogue 2023, may I please call upon the conference convener, Ambassador Gautam Bambawale, to the stage. Ambassador Bambawale is a trustee of the Pune International Center and over his long and illustrious career in the Foreign Service has served as India's High Commissioner to Pakistan and as the Ambassador of India to China and Bhutan. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Shilpa. Hope I can hear me loud and clear at the back. Dr. S. Jaishankar, Honorable External Affairs Minister of India. Before Namgek Seri, Honorable Finance Minister of Bhutan. Mr. Ibrahim Amir, Honorable Finance Minister of the Maldives. Respected Mr. N.R. Narayan Murthy, Dr. R.A. Mashelkar, President of the Pune International Center. Dr. Vijay Kulekar, Vice President of the Pune International Center, distinguished speakers and honored guests. As the convener of this International Geo-Economics Conference, the Asia Economic Dialogue, I extend a very warm welcome to you all. This conference, as all of you would have seen, is jointly organized by the Ministry of External Affairs of India and the Pune International Center. I recall that in its first 3 years, this conference was organized in Mumbai, but in 2020, Pune International Center accepted the responsibility of doing this conference here in the city of Pune. In February 2020, we held our very first conference in physical format at this very location in our city. Soon thereafter, the COVID or corona crisis, a public health crisis, descended on all of us across the globe. Therefore, in 2021 and in 2022, we hosted this conference online in virtual format. Now, after a gap of 3 years, we are again hosting the Asia Economic Dialogue in physical format. To be fair, we should call it partly physical and partly virtual because some speakers are attending virtually and a large part of the audience is also virtual. Let me also clarify that because we call this conference the Asia Economic Dialogue, it does not imply that we are only about Asia. Not at all. Our conference themes are of global import and significance. We have speakers from around the world, not just from Asia, but also from the United States, Brazil, Mexico, and other places. We are particularly delighted that our partner organization, SEBRI, or the Brazilian Center for International Relations, is also represented at this year's conference. Ladies and gentlemen, as all of you know, 2023 is a special year for India as we share or preside over the G20. Hence, this year's Asia Economic Dialogue is our own small contribution on this very special occasion. We shall continue to work hard with our partners to grow this conference in the coming years. Let me end by extending once again a warm welcome to all of you. Thank you very much. I hand over back to the Master of Ceremonies. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador, for your warm welcome and introduction. I now request the President of the Pune International Center, Dr. Raghunath Mashekar, to offer his introductory remarks at AED 2023. Dr. Mashekar, globally renowned scientist, is the recipient of the Padma Bhushan, India's second highest civilian award. He has served as Director of the National Chemical Laboratory, NCL in Pune, as well as the Director General of CSIR in Delhi, besides holding numerous other high-ranking positions in India and overseas. Dr. Mashekar, over to you, sir.
Our Honorable External Affairs Minister of India, Dr. Jaishankar, Excellencies, Mr. Vipul and Sharing, the Honorable Finance Minister of Bhutan, Mr. Ibrahim Amir, Honorable Finance Minister of Maldives, our most beloved and respected friend, Narayan Murthy, our beloved President Dr. Vijay Kedkar, our most dynamic convener of this conference, Ambassador Dr. Mabalik, distinguished speakers, participants, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Pune International Center, I extend a very hearty, a very warm welcome to you all, and how happy we are to see that we are getting back to the old normal of a physical meeting. After the new normal we had forced us to be satisfied with the virtual meeting. Of course, as a scientist, I will emphasize this is a digital meeting, not just physical, not just digital, as Ambassador Dr. Mubad explained to you. The hundreds of participants will join us, and also several speakers will join us digitally. We wish to first thank the Ministry of External Affairs on whose behalf we are holding this conference. I especially want to thank our Honorable Minister of External Affairs. They have shown such a great trust, such a great affection for the International Center. Sir, your virtual presence last year during the inaugural was very important, very significant for us. But even more significant is your physical presence in this conference, despite overwhelming responsibilities on behalf of the nation, especially during these turbulent times that we carry day in and day out. I'm so admirative.
Thank you so much. I extend a warm welcome to all the participants to this digital, as I said, AED 2023 on behalf of our beloved city of Pune. Pune is a great city of culture, education, research, innovation, and now it is also known as a vaccine city after the COVID pandemic. Pune has been historically also a city of great thought leaders, and the present Pune is no exception. We pride ourselves in the fact that Pune International Center, during its decade-long journey now, has become a leading center of policy research, thoughts, and ideas. We always emphasize that Pune International Center is an international center in Pune, or hosting the International Geoeconomics Conference in the form of its flagship annual conference is just one of the many manifestations of PIC's global outreach program. Let me briefly comment on the choice of our themes of AED so far. The theme of AED 2020 was Asia and emerging international trading systems. Then we had the massive impact of the pandemic. The themes for AED 2021 and AED 2022 chose themselves in the post-pandemic era, and they were most appropriately first, post-COVID-19 global trade and finance dynamics in 2021, and resilient growth in the post-pandemic world in AED 2022. They followed naturally after the pandemic. chosen are intimately woven around this central theme. I must proudly make a special mention of India. India holds the presidency of the G20 this year, and therefore two important sessions deal with not only India's vision for the G20 presidency, but also with how the global South will shape the G20 agenda. We at PIC are proud of the fact that 44 speakers from 12 nations will be participating in the deliberations. Finally, looking at the extent of participation, quality of participants, and that of the deliberations, and finally, the impact of the AED event so far, some of our well-wishers have been saying that AED is clearly emerging as the Davos of Asia. On behalf of PIC, I want to assure our Ministry of External Affairs and also the nation that we at PIC will do everything to live up to not only that expectation, but even go beyond to create a Davos Plus in years to come. I'm sure AED 2023 will be an intellectually stimulating and exhilarating experience with deliberations which will set the mood, the tone, the direction for our accelerated, sustainable, and equitable global growth. Again, a very, very, very warm welcome to you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir, for that rich background, for the positivity, for the encouragement, and for setting the tone for AED 2023. Our inaugural session will be moderated by Ambassador Gautam Bambawale. I welcome to the stage our distinguished chair and panelists, His Excellency Mr. Ibrahim Amir, the Honorable Minister of Finance from the Maldives, His Excellency Mr. Leonpo Namgai Shering, the Honorable Finance Minister of the Royal Government of Bhutan, and His Excellency Dr. S. Jaishankar, the Honorable Minister for External Affairs, Government of India. Welcome. Welcome once again. Ambassador Bambawale, the floor is yours. Thank you.
So what we thought was that instead of having speeches as normally happens at other conferences, this inaugural session will be more in the form of a discussion with all three ministers from India, from Bhutan, as well as from the Maldives. And perhaps if I may start with Dr. S. Jaishankar, Honorable External Affairs Minister of India. You know, the title of this particular conference is Asia in the Emerging World Order. So one of the underlying assumptions is that there is some change taking place in the world order. As Dr. Mashelkar said in his opening remarks, the 3 C's, and sir, you have mentioned this in your remarks earlier too in your speeches, that the 3 C's of COVID, conflict, and climate have impacted the world and have shocked the world, provided shocks to the world. But sir, what I'd like to ask you is that in this background, and as you sit in Delhi, what are the 3 most important things, themes, which go through your mind? What are the 3 most important things which animate your mind in your day-to-day work? Dr. Jaishankar, please.
Right now.
Yes.
Well, if I were to pick 3 big issues in the forefront of my thoughts, one, I would actually reflect on our neighborhood. Neighborhood, partly because we are the neighborhood, the three of us. We have an approach since 2014 called Neighborhood First. It's the neighborhood itself has seen a sea change. I'm not sure it's something which people in our own country fully understand and appreciate. I think the neighborhood perhaps does more than we ourselves do. So to me, the neighborhood first would be one big, I would say, concern, focus, thought, call it what you will. The second would be the state of the world, you know, would be the state of the world. I think the three C's is a very snappy summing up of the problems, which is COVID, conflict, and climate. And climate is increasingly an operational problem, not just existential one, because we can see already that climate is creating disruptions to the routine economic, routine operations of the global economy. It's not obviously enough to say I got a 3C problem. You got to have a solution. And I think the solution is also a kind of a 3C solution, which is that somewhere there has to be a degree of creativity, a sense of caution about this world we are entering to. And finally, I think that the world is suffering today from credibility issues. So to me, there are 3Cs as a problem. There are probably 3Cs as some kind of solution. And the third is the G20 presidency. It's a very important responsibility at a very critical moment. I think there are a lot of expectations from India. We too must look at the world and see how we can use it to enhance global awareness, which is very important for India if it is to develop the mindset of a rising power. So those would be my slightly long-winded answers, which is really neighborhood first, state of the world, and G20.
Thank you. Perhaps I could ask the same question to Honorable Linpo, the Finance Minister of Bhutan. Sir, as you sit in Thimphu and when you go to your office every day, what are the three major things or three major topics or three major issues which animate your thinking, which have your attention on a day-to-day basis? Linpo, if I could request you to take that question, please.
Thank you, Ambassador Bambawali. First of all, my greetings and very good evening to all the distinguished participants here. And my apologies for exposing my leg, because this is where the very concept of GNH is ingrained. So I think probably some of the distinguished delegates might not have seen the costume that we are used to wearing in Bhutan as a part of our national dress. Anyways, coming back to the topic, I think for Bhutan as a small developing nation, challenged with the topographical difficulties, and I mean to say we are landlocked, and especially because of the COVID, in the post-pandemic world, the three important aspects that actually lingers around my mind, that actually disturbs me, and sometimes I see that as an opportunity to grow from strength to strength, but sometimes I see that as a troublemaker for the small developing nation like Bhutan. And the first and the foremost is the geopolitical tensions around the world, and case in point, the ongoing Ukraine war, which has actually impacted and severely disrupted the supply chain. And this has actually resulted in Bhutan as a small economy, and most importantly, we being largely an import-driven economy, we are susceptible to, the injected form of an inflation, and which has caused macroeconomic imbalances. And this is a serious concern that we don't see an upfront intervention or response to that. But I think having a dear neighbor with a lot of economic resilience and a lot of innovations like India, I think we are very much positive that the growth in India will directly or indirectly translate or have a cascading effect into a smaller economy like us. Second aspect that I see is the climate change. I think climate change has become a kind of a universal the phenomenon, the challenge, whether the country is sea locked or landlocked. And for instance, in Bhutan, we always say that we always praise ourselves, saying that we are not only carbon neutral, but we are carbon negative. That's the fact. We have a forest coverage of 72%, and our constitution mandates that forest coverage should be maintained at all times at 60%. But having said that, I think if the partners across the world doesn't play their equal roles and responsibilities, it doesn't keep up their words, I think smaller nations cannot make much difference. The biggest challenge for Bhutan, because of the climate change effect, is the glacial lake outburst. We are highly susceptible and vulnerable to gulf. And third important aspect that actually, bothers me day-on-day basis is the widening trade deficit. There's also macroeconomic imbalances. So basically, we are, I think, India being our largest trading partner, with the presence of Honorable Minister, Honorable S. Jaishankar here, India has been doing a wonderful, facilitating in every spheres for Bhutan. But further, I think there are scopes where, country like Bhutan needs to actually discuss and dive deeper into understanding a lot of problems along the borders with regard to non-tariff barriers. So that I thought that I will be raising at a different level with the honorable ministers from government of India, and of course with the honorable S. Jaishankar here. So these are three important aspects that I see that for a small landlocked country like Bhutan, if we don't find a solution, a prominent solution, which of course should be sustainable, I think post-pandemic recovery will be an uphill task for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Last but not the least, let me turn to the Honorable Finance Minister of the Maldives, His Excellency Mr. Ibrahim Amir, and ask him the same question. Mr. Minister, what are the three things which are at the top of your mind when you go to work every day in Malé?
Thank you. Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to really thank the Pune International Center and also the Ministry of Foreign Affairs from India for giving me this opportunity. It gives me great pride in sharing the stage with Honorable Foreign Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar, and as well Minister of Finance from Bhutan, a dear friend of mine. As the Minister of Finance, the way I think about these three things at the current point of time may be vastly different from others. Everyone here will know Maldives as a destination for sun, sand, and the sea. But I believe we have a lot to offer. Maldives is not a poor country. Maldives now is a upper middle income country. And as the Minister of Finance, Ambassador, the three things that really bothers me right now is actually, as mentioned, number one, climate change. As you know, Maldives is very much prone to the effects of climate change. Our very existence is threatened by the changes in climate change. And a large part of our budget is spent on climate adaptation and climate mitigation efforts. And if you look at the numbers from 2011 till now, we have spent around $587 million on climate mitigation and climate adaptation projects. And also, if you look at our main sectors that drive our economy, it is mainly based on our natural resources, which is the tourism, and also the fisheries sector. The climate adaptation and climate mitigation efforts. Maldives is very low lying, and why it bothers me is that so far we have not been able to tap into the climate finances, cheap climate finances that is being pledged by the developed countries in several COP meetings. So because of that, we are forced to go to the markets, borrow at a higher cost, and then make sure our islands are there for the tourists to come, and we are there. The other thing is, second thing is the external shocks. Namely, very recently we have the COVID, and now we have the war in Ukraine. During COVID, as you know, Maldives is very much reliant on tourism, and we closed our borders for 3 months, and our economy declined by around 33%. Maldives was one of the worst hit countries during COVID, but it really showed the resilience of our tourism sector, that we were also one of the countries that rebounded very strongly in 2021 and even 2022. And now we have surpassed where we were in 2019, and our tourism sector is faring better than we were in 2019. And also, as the Minister of Finance, I am also always thinking about the developmental challenges. All the more important because during COVID, our GDP declined, our government revenue declined, and our debt situation also got worsened. And we cannot delay development. We cannot have 10, 15 years for water and sanitation projects, climate adaptation projects. So how do we make sure that we have developmental projects, and then also be mindful of our fiscal sustainability and also our debt sustainability issues? So in short, number one, climate change. Number two, the external shocks, the COVID and also the Ukraine war. I would also like to highlight, because of the Ukraine-Russia war, the small island nations like the Maldives and I believe the Bhutan, also most of the countries, because of the increase in oil prices, increase in food prices, it really affected our fiscal space. So that is also a very worrying aspect of this war. And thirdly, the developmental efforts. How do we make sure that there is continuation of our developmental projects?
Thank you. Minister Jaishankar, if I could ask you to elaborate on India's approach to its presidency of the G20. What are the major themes that we want to take up? I saw from some of the recent developments that we want to voice the opinions of the Global South. If you could talk a little bit to that issue. Also, in different cities of India, we have felt the impact of the G20. It is one of the objectives of this government to take the G20 to different parts of India. And we've had one meeting at least, if not more, here in Pune, and we saw how it did positively impact Pune at that time. So could I request you to talk a little more about India's ideas behind its presidency of the G20?
Gautam, let me do one thing. Let me take it in 3 parts. How are we going about the G20 presidency? Number two, what you said about the voice of the Global South. And three, what are our expectations of what's going to come out of the G20? I would say on the first one, the G20 today, it began out in 2008 as a very immediate response to the global financial crisis. I think many of you are very intimately familiar with it. And over a period of time with each G20 presidency, more and more layers and facets were added. So, environment got in, health got in, foreign policy got in, business got in, youth. So today there are actually 15 tracks, 15 ministerial tracks. The heart of the G20 is still very much finance. It's still very much finance. It's still very much development. The mandate of the G20 is really growth and development. Now, how are we going to go about it? Because it has developed so many aspects, facets, there are roughly about 200 meetings which any president, any country which is holding the presidency has to organize in the space of that year. So when we started thinking about it, Prime Minister had, this thought that it should not be a capital-centric exercise, nor should it be, a mice industry exercise. So you don't want people to get off the plane, go to the meeting, do the hotel dinner, get on a plane and go back. And you don't want them to do Delhi and, maybe Agra, Jaipur and say, okay, I've seen India. I've had 3 pictures and I'm done. The idea was, this is an opportunity for the world to get to know India better. So get people to travel to, every province of India, to different cities of India, cities which are not, and towns which are not normally used to hosting international conventions and meetings. Obviously, there's a kind of a threshold. They should have the infrastructure to deal with. And the advantage of doing this is, considering there are 200 meetings, and each one of them will have at the very least a few hundred delegates and officials who will come. Just look at the total number of people who will actually be visiting us from foreign countries in that year. And these are, in today's parlance, in their respective societies, they're all influencers of every kind. So you have actually, by spreading it across the country, this is a kind of a marketing of India to the influential people of those 20 countries and changing their thinking, exposing India to them, exposing India in every sense, the cultural diversity, the socio-economic changes which are taking place, the energy and the sort of enthusiasm today among people, the cuisine, the arts, the music. So that's one side of it. The other side is also, every time a town or a city or a university or a institution, they host such a meeting. Now, I've come from earlier in the day to Symbiosis, and they are hosting the Youth 20 meeting. Now, for them, it's a big deal. They are, everybody is excited about it. Everybody's getting prepared about it. Some months ago, I went to Imphal. Now, all we did, as part of what was their major festival, we actually opened what was the G20 photo booth kind of. There was a logo with, leaves on all sides. You stand out there, but the amount of interest in Imphal, because that sense, oh, something is coming our way, we're going to be part of it. Yeah. This too is part of developing an awareness in the country about the world. And we should do that. We need to do that. We are actually behind the curve. We are today the 5th largest economy in the world. We will be the 3rd largest economy very soon. But if you look at our significance to the global workplace, and I have somebody like Dr. Narayan Murthy sitting in front of me, our significance to the global workplace is actually going to grow enormously because there's a fundamental mismatch of the demand and supply when it comes to talent and skills today. And countries in a knowledge economy are willing to take bold steps to fix it. So as we say, this is getting the world India ready, is getting India world ready. And that's the way this whole thing is being planned. Now, voice of the global south. Why do we need voice of the global south? Because what we saw in the last year, and it's something which we had seen not with the same degree of disquiet, but especially last year, it was very evident to us, which is one big problem was taking up all the oxygen. And the second order, third order consequences of that, those were not being adequately sort of appreciated. I mean, if you heard, our two finance ministers sitting here, what is their concern? They are talking today of the external shocks, which is creating fiscal stress on them because their oil prices are going up, their food prices are going up. They're worrying whether the fertilizer prices, in fact, will the fertilizer be accessible apart from being affordable. So we felt that it was important that the entirety of global problems be put at the center of G20, not just one particular issue, and however important that issue might be. And secondly, that if there is one country among the G20, which the global south trusts us, whatever you might say. I mean, there is that sense, and that sense, by the way, has been heightened by Vaccine Maitri. That if you go to Africa today, to the Caribbean, to parts of Asia, and say, people say, yeah, there's India, at least, okay, that guy will voice our worries. So, but we didn't want to do it with a sense of presumption that we speak for everybody. We wanted a consultative process. So in fact, very painstakingly last month, we did consultations. This was the Prime Minister himself, myself, Finance Minister, Trade Minister, Environment Minister. We spoke to 125 countries at our level. And today, and the basic conversation was G20 is going to happen. So tell us, what is your concern? What is it? And then you kind of make a distillate of that and articulate it. And I think it's important today, not just in the G20. I think part of the problems even with the UN and the UN Security Council is that the voice of Global South is missing. If there is a logical, shall I say, candidate for that responsibility, it is us. We would be shirking our duty if we didn't do that. Now, what will happen out of the G20? Look, it's a bit early because we have to, I think tomorrow the finance ministers meeting, physical meeting is taking place. The foreign ministers meeting is on the 1st and 2nd of March. We will have to go through a set of meetings to see what happens at G20 is a lot of things are on slow boil. Okay. Now, which one of them gets cooked in one particular year is difficult to predict. It has to be decided amongst the G20. But there are a set of issues, and I would like to reassure both our colleagues that green finance is really right, absolutely on top of the issues. I mean, today, if you ask me 3 big issues in the world, I would put really green finance because I'm not putting green growth, because I think without finance, people talk about growth, but they seem to think that ambitions should be divorced from resources. The reality is we haven't moved that far ahead because the resources were not there. So I think this will take a little while to emerge, probably really till the summit in September.
Thank you, Minister. The Maldives and Bhutan are both part of the Global South. So let me start by asking the Honorable Finance Minister of the Maldives, Mr. Minister, what are your expectations at this point of time as the world is exiting the COVID pandemic, as we look for greater growth, as your fiscal space shrinks, as you rightly said? What are your expectations from the G20? And so let me request the Honorable Finance Minister of the Maldives to go first, and then request Honorable Finance Minister of Bhutan to answer the same question.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I believe for countries like Maldives, it is very important in order to address the issues of climate change that we have cheaper financing available. At the moment, we also have to make sure that we carry out developmental projects. During COVID, you saw that because of the decline in GDP, our debt to GDP numbers went up to around 150%. Now again, because increase in tourist arrivals, tourism sector is faring better than expected. Our GDP is also now increasing. So we see that the debt numbers are also coming down. In order to make sure that we have fiscal space and also carry out developmental projects, we need climate financing, which is cheaper. But so far, during different COP meetings, around $100 billion have been pledged, but we have not been able to tap into this climate financing and use this financing to make sure that we are able to use this funding for very important climate adaptation projects and mitigation projects for countries like the Maldives. And in the Maldives, it is always an emergency. We cannot wait 1-2 years for the project documentation to be complete. And after 2-3 years, we get the funding. And when we get the funding, the island is not there anymore. 20-30% of our islands are eroded by, if we don't do anything for, let's say, 2-3 years. So it is always an emergency situation, and we are forced to use our budgets, our own domestic resources to make sure that we have climate adaptation measures like building coastal protection, like building the harbors as well. So I believe at the top of the G20 agenda, the issue of climate financing, green financing is very important. And now I have had various discussions with other multilateral organizations like IMF, World Bank, and others as well. Green financing, climate financing, or any other financing, there is no differentiation. Even with climate financing, there are a lot of conditions. And I believe there shouldn't be any conditions with climate financing. The only thing should be that it should be earmarked for climate adaptation projects and climate mitigation projects. If you look at, let's say, for example, what is the rating of the country and what are the macroeconomic fundamentals, and then make available this climate financing, I believe it defeats the problem because we are planning to go to the market and issue green and blue bonds, but green, blue, or any other color you give, these financing does not differentiate with any conventional financing, because at the end of the day, we get the same rates as any conventional financing. So I believe there should be some kind of an architecture where, or mechanism where mostly climate vulnerable nations and more importantly, small island developing states who are at the forefront of climate change should be able to get cheaper climate financing, and it should be yesterday and not today or tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you. And if I could turn to you, Linpo, and ask you the same question, how does Bhutan, what are Bhutan's expectations from the G20?
Thank you very much, Ambassador Gautam. First of all, let me take this opportunity to congratulate India under the leadership of Shri Narendra Modi ji for assuming, for taking the presidency of the G20, and of course for Honorable Prime Minister for assuming the chair of the G20. I think before I jump onto the expectation, I would like to, with conviction, I would like to glaringly make a mention here that I personally, Bhutan personally doesn't have an inch of doubt with the capability of India to chair this world premier forum, bringing in world leaders and the thinkers to deliberate on the world orders. And my special congratulations also goes to you, sir, for your leadership in that. When it comes to G20, I think the only expectation as a small developing nation would be because I see that whatever agenda is tabled for G20, probably unlike the past G20s, especially after the pandemic, the whole perception and the perspective to how you look at the problem has changed. Because pandemic has brought in a lot of new perceptions, new innovations, the way we think, the way we conduct our businesses. So for that matter, I think probably the core emphasis of the upcoming G20 summit in India in September will basically, I assume in that manner, the way Honorable External Affairs Minister was making a mention, that it will be more focused on the post-pandemic recovery, irrespective of the size of the country. Again, we don't have a doubt on India that by representing the Global South, I think it also represents our voice. So for that matter, I think the major concern for us as a small developing nation will be the debt distress in medium to long term. So for that matter, I think our expectation, and as well you can describe as our request, will be to look into relaxing the global financial conditions, because with the tightening global financial conditions, I think it is incurring a lot of imposing a lot of challenge on us, which we don't actually on our own don't find a solution to that. And the second would be, I think, because we need to understand that other than the pandemic, where actually the problem has emerged, where problem has erupted, because we never expected Ukraine war. So for that matter, I think G20 is a platform as well, beyond economic discussions, dialogues. I think it is also, I perceive that it is also a forum for the global leaders to discuss global peace, prosperity, and stability, through which everything comes into order. And the third point that I expect would be, as rightly mentioned by the Honorable External Affairs Minister, on the green financing, which is a very, very pertinent topic for a country like Bhutan, because of our the efforts that we made in conserving the nature. So we see this as an opportunity, as a means to meet the fiscal deficit, and also to address the fiscal instability issues. Because when you talk about innovative financing, we only think about issuance of green bond. But this being a new concept, I think if this could be taken forward, and I think we see a lot of opportunities to leverage on that. And lastly, but not the least, the expectation. I think this goes as a wish list, a long list from my side, but nevertheless, I see that when we actually access the global financing, be it from the multilateral development banks or bilateral partners, I think the conditions where we access the financing, I think irrespective of the size of the economy, irrespective of the size of the country, the conditions are I would see that often it's the same. So basically in G20 forum, because G20 members also largely represent in the World Bank, ADB, and other MDBs. So we see that if there is an opportunity as to represent the voice of South, Global South, if there is an opportunity for a smaller nation to have better concessional conditions to access the global financing. So these are, like basically goes like a shopping list, but I think if you really dive deeper into it and understand, probably these are the critical issues that can really give a prominent facelift for the smaller economies like us to recover in a sustainable manner in a post-pandemic world. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Linpo. Honorable Minister Jaishankar, you mentioned neighborhood first. And my question to you would be that, previous governments also placed a lot of importance on our neighborhood, on our region, on our South Asian region. But is there something that your government is doing which is different from earlier? Have we moved into a higher gear where our neighborhood is concerned? I would request you to talk a little bit about our neighborhood and how we are helping not just countries like the Maldives and Bhutan who are present here today, but also other neighbors.
Gautam, you and I have been in this business a long time, and a long time over multiple governments. So even though I'm in politics today and you lead a more happier existence, the fact is there are real changes, and I don't think these are not necessarily political points that anybody is scoring. No question that after 2014, there has been a really profound transformation in the way in which India has approached its neighbors. And as I said, a lot of it is because actually you can say it's the Indian leadership, the Indian system, whatever. We have gone back to the basics and asked ourselves the question, what kind of relationship do we want with our neighbors? So if you ask me what has changed, I would say, look, if you use the metrics of connectivity, of projects, of different kinds of developmental partnership expressions. So one part of it is what is it we are doing? Another part is how are we doing it? And the third is really the sweeping scale of what we are doing. And finally, that sense that today our fortunes are all tied together. I would honestly, very, very objectively say by each of these metrics, there's actually been a big change in a decade. And let me illustrate. Okay. I mean, let me, for example, point to Maldives. Today, if you have in Maldives a very major connectivity project, like the Greater Malay Connectivity Project, we've never done a project of that scale in our neighborhood. In fact, we've never done a project of that scale anywhere in the world. If you were to, again, I was there a few weeks ago, laying the foundation stone of an airport lengthening project we're doing, because we do realize that by modernizing that airport, giving it greater capacity, a whole new set of islands now have access to international tourism in a way in which they didn't. And that very directly feeds into the GDP. So that one airport project actually has an enormous multiplier effect on their economy. Now, I'm giving you two big examples, but there are examples. We had these in the south, in Addu. There are a whole set of, practical development projects of a community kind, which actually people appreciate. When they think of international cooperation, it's a nice word, but if that means that they've just got a water purification plant or a electricity connection or better roads or a sewage system, it means the world to them. Now, that's what's happening there. Now, to differing degrees, in every one of our neighboring countries. I mean, again, I'm just using, since you asked this question, a decade as a differential. We are today supplying electricity uh, to our neighbors, except Bhutan, from whom we are buying electricity. And now, by the way, we have started to buy electricity from Nepal as well. Now, to my mind, giving them, selling them electricity is very important because they need it. Buying electricity from them is equally important because it's a regular revenue source for them. So, and now that's only possible if we, along with them, build the grid connectivity. A second example, many of our neighbors were actually paying much higher prices for their energy. Nepal was a very prime example because energy, petrol and diesel used to be trucked in. Now, when we built this pipeline from Motihari to Amlekhganj, it's brought down prices of fuel very, very significantly in Nepal. You know, we built roads in the what are called the Terai roads, the Hulaki roads out there. I mean, they were there. We've sort of modernized them, broadened them. The moment you get much broader roads, I mean, there's a clear both a supply chain and a economic benefit that come. Now, I can give you a Bangladeshi variant of it. You can see it in roads, you can see it in rails, you can see it in access to ports, in waterways. So the entire neighborhood actually in the last 10 years today has started to realize, frankly, that India is prepared to put its money where its mouth is, that these are not just sermons and homilies on good neighbor relationship that we give out. It is backed by very solid cooperation projects. And I think, Minister, you would bear me out. I mean, in the case of Bhutan as well. I mean, even in this period of the last decade, we've had actually a new hydro, Mangdechu has come on stream hydro project. We are looking at some very big health commitments, at educational commitments. So at one level today, the neighborhood actually believes that India has a non-reciprocal, I would say a collective view, a regional view of the neighborhood, where the prosperity of India, the resources of India are actually a lifting tide for the entire neighborhood. They also know, as you can see from the Sri Lankan experience, that if God forbid something really catastrophic happens, that India is there. That India is there in a macro economic sense, but India is also there, by the way, in case, you have a climate event or as they had some oil spills and things like that. So go around and, look, we've all done this beat for many years. Today, when you do this beat, you hear very, very different feedback about India. And it's also reflected in, their own sort of their, shall I say, enthusiasm, or even in business today in getting closer. So I, again, I do not make this so much as a political point, but I do say that greater a vision of a region, a very clear direction from the top, that look, please approach the neighbors generously, non-reciprocally, credibly, do it on the ground, follow it up, ask, look to see what is important for them. Try and do things which will impact, the lives of the people. All this, I think, has really paid off.
Thank you. I must ask you a follow-up question, Minister Jaishankar, and my audience, I know, wants me to ask you this question, that in our whole neighborhood first policy, there's one country to which you sent me as Ambassador or High Commissioner to our west, called Pakistan, with which we have nothing to do, which we are doing nothing about. So, at this point of time when Pakistan is going through some economic difficulties, do you think this is a point when there can be some kind of rapprochement between India and Pakistan?
Look, obviously, it's in nobody's interest that any country, least of all a neighboring country, get into severe economic difficulties. Nobody sensible, nobody mature would even nurse that thought. But it's an equal fact that when any country gets into a serious economic problem, that country has to make policy choices and governance decisions to get themselves out of it. Another country, neighbor or non-neighbor or another institution, others cannot solve a problem if you're not prepared to solve it yourself. So let's be clear on the first point, which is that the solution, this is not a Pakistan point, it's a generic global point. Any country in deep economic difficulties has to come out of it through, what the world can do is to provide options and support systems. But the bottom line has to be done by that country, and often it will require very tough choices. Now, I want all of us to remember, we went through this 30 years ago. So it's not something which happens to other people. It also happened to us. It happened to us not once. It happened to us maybe not with the same severity at various other points of time in our modern history as well. But having said that, the reality of this particular relationship is that it has a fundamental issue which we cannot and we must not avoid. And that issue is that of terrorism. Because the moment you start doing these walkarounds, that, let's find a joint statement which will which will get us agreed language. Let us reach out at this point and see where this goes. That's been the talk of the last 75 years. And look where it got us. So I think we need clarity that, and we mustn't be in denial of what are very fundamental problems in that relationship. And just as, a country has to fix its economic issues, a country has to fix its political issues too. A country has to fix its social issues. No country is ever going to come out of a difficult situation and become a prosperous power if its basic industry is terrorism. So among the changes which need to be made are also changes pertaining to all of that. So I think that remains a very major problem. I also think, as today, as someone in politics, if I were to look at any big decision I'm making, I would also look at what is the public sentiment. I would have a pulse. What do my people feel about it? And I think you know the answer.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Let me say that we are going to slowly, I'm going to turn to the two honorable ministers from both Bhutan and the Maldives. But after that round of questions, we're going to open it up to the floor. So please keep your questions ready. Let there be questions, short, to the point. But we are coming there. So let me first turn to Linpo Namgyet Tsering. And, Honorable Minister Jaishankar spoke about how India is providing development assistance in its neighborhood. Could you expound on how India and Bhutan are working together on developmental partnership between our two countries?
Thank you. I think more than me, I think Ambassador Gautam, you're in Bhutan, so you must be doing everything excellent in a, yeah, exactly. And I'm very proud to make a mention here that the former diplomatic, through the establishment of the mission office, which was later upgraded into the embassies in Delhi as well as in Thimphu, I think since 1961, when we started our first developmental plan, just like in India, you have a cycle of 5-year development plan. we started our five-year developmental plan from 1961. So the two subsequent plans, the first five-year plan and second five-year plan are fully financed by government of India. So I think that in itself shows the the kind of an instrumental role, kind of a facilitating role the government of India has played in shaping the developmental activities in the country, in Bhutan. Uh, Indeed, you know, the if when or the third king, His Majesty King Jigme Dorji Wangchuck, on the invitation of Honorable Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru, he visited Bhutan back in 1953, and there's a reciprocal visit, on the invitation of a third king from India, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, uh, with the daughter Indira Gandhi ji. They came to Bhutan on the, riding on a yak, basically. We didn't have a motorable road by then. That was in 1958. And that was the very time where the groundbreaking ceremony of the first national highway from Phuntsholing, the bordering town with the state of West Bengal, and Thimphu was initiated. So that was back in 1958. So I think if you look into the history of our developmental activities, I think the policy that India is adopting right now, the neighborhood first policy, I think it has actually gone beyond that and really brought a lot of developmental activities. So I think India is not only the closest neighbor to Bhutan per se, but I think India is also the largest trading partner to Bhutan. And if you look into the import pattern, because as I mentioned earlier, Bhutan is largely import driven. So we, if you look into, I think we are seeing increasing trade deficit all, for past many years, I would say decades. And 93% of our imports are made from India. And if you look into Bhutan's export, which is substantially low as compared to the import that we're making, I would say 98% of our exports are going to India. So I think then in itself you can make out that the kind of the relationship that the two countries share. And one interesting fact I would like to make a mention here, that since Bhutanese neutral currency is pegged to the Indian rupee, if you look into the trend of the economic performance, the GDP pattern, you see like for past 2 decades, Bhutan actually follows the pattern of Indian economy. So we are a bit optimistic because now the World Economic Outlook report published in January 2023 indicates that advanced economies, the growth is downgraded. Emerging markets, emerging economies like India, I think because of the kind of resilience that Indian economy has, I think your GDP is not downgraded by significant figure. It's just downgraded as per the forecast of IMF. It's just downgraded from 6.8 to 6.1%, which is significant, I would say. I think your Indian economy is only going to grow. So for that matter, I think it doesn't mean that we're being complacent here, but looking at the historical trend of Bhutanese economic growth, which follows the Indian trajectory, I see that there definitely is going to be a spillover benefit and effect into our Bhutanese economy. So for that matter, I would again say that, I think beyond neighborhood first policy, I think our relationship, be it in terms of trade, be in terms of, culture, be in terms of anything you talk about, I think it is only going to grow from strength to strength. And of course, I would like to again take this opportunity to thank the people of India, the government of India, for because we are the first recipient of the vaccine, the Covishield, 250 doses back in 2020 through that never first policy. And indeed, India has chartered your own flight to reach the vaccines and hand over to the people of Bhutan. That was a very momentous opportunity, and I would like to thank for that. Thank you very much.
And if I could turn to you, Honorable Finance Minister Maldives, Mr. Ibrahim Amir, on the same question about India and the Maldives developmental partnership? How is it progressing?
Thank you. Thank you. Somebody asked me what they can do to help the Maldives address the fiscal issues now and the debt sustainability issues that we face now. I always say, come to the Maldives, go to a resort and enjoy our hospitality, because you are spending dollars there that addresses our our fiscal sustainability issues. And
Minister, you should invite the AED to hold its next session there.
yes, we should do that. So now what we see is that actually Indian travelers have is actually not the share the number one market for the tourists who are coming to the Maldives. And we see a number of Bollywood stars also going to the Maldives, and it is acting as a good publicity for our tourism sector. So that is very important. The India and Maldives share a unique bond based on mutual respect, trust, and understanding that goes beyond simple geographical and historical and cultural ties. As the Honorable Minister, Dr. Jayashankar mentioned, there is a fundamental difference between the developmental projects that we are carrying with the Indian assistance. I believe that is that the developmental projects that we are carrying with Indian assistance is mainly geared towards future growth, which is very important. What are the developmental projects that are carried out right now? Number one, as mentioned by the minister, we are having a Greater Male connectivity project, which will actually transform Maldivian economy. And it is also, we are also relocating our commercial port, which is in Male, to a nearby island, which will connect this connectivity bridge, which will mean actually that will drive our economic growth in the years to come. And then we are also developing two international airports in the north, one in the north, one in the south. In the north, which is the Hanimado International Airport, which will have a capacity of around 1.8 to 2.1 million tourists a year. And when we do that, it will also mean that more investors go to the north, where actually we have much more beautiful islands than which is actually in the center, where we have most of the resorts now. And also in the south, South Gain International Airport, again being developed with the assistance of line of credit facility from Exim, will have a capacity of around 1.8 million. So now we are a $6 billion economy, but when we do these international airports in the north and in the south, in a few years' time, let's say in 5-10 years, we are looking at not a $6 billion economy. I believe we are looking at, let's say, 15, $20 billion economy. And also we have very important basic infrastructures, water and sanitation projects. When we came into this government in end of 2018, we had only around 30% of our country had proper water and sanitation projects. But now with the assistance of Indian Exim, we are currently having water and sanitation projects in all of the other 70% of the islands. So by the end of this year, we will, in all of the islands, we will have proper water and sanitation completed. So I believe these are very important projects, meaning that more economic activity can actually take place in these islands once these projects are completed. And the other thing is I am very happy that most of these projects are carried out in a transparent manner. Uh, the pre-qualification processes happen in India, and then also there is a proper tendering process in Mali as well. So so we have most of these developmental projects carried out with the assistance of Indian Exim, and also there are buyer's credit projects, social housing projects. At the moment, we are carrying out around 6,000 social housing projects are being carried out with the assistance of buyer's credit funding. So I believe that most of these projects will, once completed, will transform Maldives' economy from a $6-7 billion economy to 15-20 billion dollar economy. These projects are purely designed always growth in mind. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to turn to the audience, but as we do that, and I do hope the microphones are ready, I cannot but ask Dr. Jaishankar, you know, foreign policy has now gone down to the masses, largely because of social media, but also because communication has become so much easier. And you have become a kind of star in the eyes of the general public, not just here in Pune, but all over the world. So my question to you, sir, and is this, can we call this the Jaishankar doctrine of Indian foreign policy?
Not really. I think there's somebody who had already laid claim, and he happens to be my boss. Yeah. And rightly so, because, you know, if there was one, every doctrine policy shift requires one inflection point that you need to capture in public mind. To me, it was the swearing in ceremony in 2014. The fact that the fact that it even occurred to an incoming Prime Minister of India saying, look, there's a change of guard, a big change, a very fundamental change happening in India, but let me now share it with my neighborhood. That to me actually showed neighborhood first. We at that time, of course, I was not even in the ministry, I was in Washington. But to me, that was the inflection point, and then it's developed bit by bit.
So you're saying we can call it the Modi doctrine of Indian foreign policy. Let's go turn to the audience, and I see a number of hands up. I think what I'd request you to is identify yourself, tell us whom the question is aimed at or who directed at, and try to be as brief as possible. I thought I saw Mr. Sudhir Mehta put his hand up. Could we have the mic here, please? And we will come to the others. We'll do a round of 3 questions and then take answers to them and then see if we have time for more.
So thank you, Gautam. And first of all, thank you to all the speakers. I think as a Punekar, all of you spoke about the importance of an airport, which was fantastic to hear. But I'll ask my question.
I got that message.
Thank you, sir. I'll ask my question on what's a very important area, which is currency. I think one of the things that, at least as citizens, we noticed earlier this week, and I think this was a extremely important event, was the India-Singapore deal for the UPI, where now any Indian citizen or any Singapore citizen can send around 60,000 rupees a day between the two countries. Given that 20% of the world trade will come from India in the coming decades, does this really go towards a systematic shift towards our foreign exchange and currency policy? Because to a great extent, while we are beginning to be a more important part of world trade, we are really dependent on the dollar. Is this a first step where we are going to see that we can have all of these kinds of connections? And if that's the case, then I would say that's a very big positive, because with the diaspora all around the world, and then hopefully this transcends into something which is more economic. Would like to get your views on this, Dr. Jaishankar.
Let's take a next question, and I see a hand up here. Ambassador Karamuru from Brazil. Do you have a question, sir? here, please, in front, right in front. आगे है यहाँ पे. Can we have another microphone?
Maybe I should talk close to the microphone. Marcos Caramuru from Brazil, SEBRE. I see that the subtitle of this conference is Asia in the Emerging World Order. And one of the main features of the new order, of the emerging order, is the emergence of Asia as a leader. First, with a contribution to world growth, very significant, I would say, and this year is going to be very important. But with time, with its contribution with values, with ideas, with the new approaches to the world reality. Then I would like to listen from Minister Jashankar and the other ministers as well. What's their vision of this new role of Asia as a leader in world reality?
Thank you. Thank you for that question. One more hand at the same table. Yes, please. Yes, sir.
Amit Paranspe, Pune International Center. I have a quick short question. You talked about our Western neighbor. Can you talk a little about our northern neighbor and how our economic relationship may evolve in the coming years?
So that's a round of 3 questions, and maybe we can start with Dr. Jaishankar, if you can, because all 3 questions were aimed at you, but one
No,
was for the
I
other
think
minister.
the first question actually is in a way better answered by, I mean, remember, we have 2 finance ministers
Yes,
here.
absolutely.
I'm just a humble foreign minister. So these guys are the serious guys in the business. But you know, to me, as a very interested, a member of the government who obviously watches financial and digital financial issues move forward, what happened with Singapore was something very, very significant. But it's one step. This is a long, arduous road. I know people. It's in our nature to define, in this respect, very ambitious objectives that one day the dollar's there, and when will the rupee internationalize to our point. But look at countries who are much bigger than us, who economically, who have actually been challenged. They made a lot of progress. I mean, in a way, it relates to the last question. They made a lot of progress, but it's much easier said than done. And to me, I mean, I have 2 finance ministers here, but what has the last year shown us? The last year has shown us that whenever the world is in trouble, the world heads towards the dollar. I mean, that's also a reality that, but maybe the first question, you gentlemen need to come in, and then I could, look at the other 2.
So let me turn to the Honorable Finance Minister of the Maldives, Mr. Ibrahim Amir. If you could go first on that question about, about the development.
How do you see the idea of a UPI arrangement with Singapore? How would it apply to you?
And also Ambassador Karamuru's question about what is Asia bringing to the table as, world economic growth continues higher and upward.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So, Maldives is very much reliant on our imports. We actually import maybe more than 99% of all our goods are imported from abroad. And a large percentage of that imports also do come from India as well. We have been in talks with Reserve Bank of India as well with regard to rupee card, rupees settlement, so that it is all the more important because right now we also face the issue of depleting US dollar reserves as well because of the increase in oil prices. So that discussion is progressing with Reserve Bank of India and our central bank as well. We are also very much involved in that. And currently, also the National Bank of Maldives also are involved in this. And not only the rupee settlement, but also we are in talks with other countries where we import heavily with regard to how we can actually have our local currency and their currency settlement. So that is already in progress. Hopefully we can achieve that as soon as possible. And the other thing is with regard to how Asia can help in this emerging world order. And I believe even now, we are doing that because if you look at the recent IMF reports as well, it says that the world economic growth is actually led by countries like India, like China, and other countries in Asia, Malaysia, Indonesia, and other countries. So I believe we are already doing that. And while we are doing that, as I mentioned, it is very important that we also address the issues of climate financing so that our countries like Maldives can actually benefit from that. Thank you.
Linpo, could I turn to you to answer those same questions, please?
Thank you. I think more than an answer, I think probably mine would be kind of the suggestion. I would say my own the submissions on this two pertinent question raised by two gentlemen. On the UPI, that government of India has initiated with Singapore, I see this as a very welcoming kind of an initiative, and I only pray that if this could be rolled out further, like because I see that this is a way forward for in the 21st century, basically to ease the way of doing business, and as well because see the case of Bhutan, because we have a lot of difficulties for our Bhutanese diasporas, those who are living abroad, in terms of sending back the money. And it has a lot of restrictions. Every country has their own financial restriction regulations. So for that matter, especially in the United States as well in Australia, people are facing a lot of difficulties to send back the money. So for that matter, I see that the financial technologies like this kind of the UPI and all these things is only going to, not only in India, but especially the neighboring countries, we see that there's an opportunity for us to leverage and write on that platform in near future. As such, in Bhutan, especially for the Indian tourists and for ease of making a payment and transfer of money, we have already adopted and launched together with the Honorable Finance Minister of India. We have already launched RuPay card and BHIM in Bhutan. So I think these are all kind of a welcoming gesture. But the pertinent, the specific question that you have asked, I think I'll still leave this up to Honorable Minister here. On the second question, Asia and the emerging world order, I see my answer response will be same as spelled out by the Maldivian Finance Minister, Honorable Finance Minister, because it's only the figure, from the figure we can make out that India contributes almost 9.2% to global GDP. So this in itself shows that I think the trend has already reversed, and the whole order has already changed. And I could, with a lot of pride, I can say that it's only going to grow stronger. And for me, I see that the theme is very, very pertinent, because it is already, it's already imperative that, India combined with China almost contributes 50% of global GDP. This in itself shows, forget about remaining the Asian countries, but I think two countries massively contributes to global GDP. So I think the whole order has already changed probably. I think this need not be qualified. This need not even qualify to be a tagline basically. It has already reversed the order. Thank you very much.
Let me respond to the world order question. I mean, there's no doubt, I think all of us, at the, on the podium, I think on the floor as well, know that the role of Asia, the salience of Asia will increase. But I think there are two cautions we need to keep in mind. One, Asia is growing because Asia has been global. What we should not fall for is this kind of Asia for Asians. That kind of rhetoric is very misleading. It kind of appeals to a very primitive chauvinism in people. It actually has a very deep strategic intent behind it. And Asia will grow, will have a greater role provided Asia remains consciously global. The second point there is also Asia itself must strive to be more multipolar. That when we speak about a multipolar world, which means, there are more countries, the diversity is better expressed. It should not be that Asia is less multipolar and the world is then expected to be more multipolar. World will be multipolar, world will be diverse and democratic only when Asia will be diverse and democratic. And that responsibility of making Asia multipolar particularly falls on India. The question on China. I do believe that the economic challenges presented by our relationship with China are really very, very serious, very formidable. I'm not entirely convinced that they've been addressed in that manner, not now, I mean, over the last 20 years. I want to remind some of you that in fact, in 2006, we could actually even have contemplated an FTA with China. This was a goal which was agreed to between the governments of India and the governments of China when President Hu Jintao, am I correct, was visiting India. At that time, it looked something which was reasonable because it was an optimistic era of the relationship. It was a time when people felt that, Chinese presence would grow, our presence would grow. Somewhere we would find maybe not a perfect balance, but some kind of balance. It was predicated on the fact that there would be reasonable market access to the Chinese economy. And in fact, I remember meeting Mr. Narayan Murthy in Shanghai when he too came with that expectation in mind. The reality has turned out to be something very, very different. And in fact, what happened was not just unequal market access. There was very little northward market access. We actually saw migration of business, not migration of company, migration of business, meaning the businesses which used to be done in India actually migrated to China, obviously under Chinese ownership. And the result of what we see today, the very, very severe imbalance, is an accumulation of all of that. Now, it's very, this, by the way, becomes a very, sometimes, I'm trying to find a polite adjective here. Let us say a dumbed down political debate. It isn't. It's a very serious matter. And the responsibility here is not just of the government. It's an equal responsibility of businesses. If we have today a huge imbalance of trade with China. Now, again, anybody doing trade will not have a problem with an imbalance per se. It is nobody's contention unless you are Donald Trump, that every trade account must be accurately balanced. Economics doesn't work that way. But when there is this kind of imbalance, where comparative advantages do not matter at all, where there are a lot of non-market factors at play, that production is determined by non-market factors, but you're giving entry on the basis, giving market access, assuming that this is some kind of market competition. So there's something fundamentally flawed here. And as I said, a lot of it depends on Indian corporates. That Indian corporates haven't developed the kind of backwards vendor supplies and components and parts and ingredients and intermediates that should be supporting us. Again, you could argue maybe the government didn't do enough. I think that's a reasonable point. So we are today trying to change this. When you look, when you say Atmanirbhar Bharat, it's not a slogan. It's actually a messaging to industry, to people saying, please, what you can source from India, you have an obligation to source, not as a moral obligation. Our national security is a threat if we have this kind of massive external exposure. And we saw that very graphically during COVID. So today when we do PLI, production linked incentives, the purpose of it is to bring back, we have to create a manufacturing culture in this country. Those who say, we should focus on services. Yes, services have a role. We may be good at it, but a major economy cannot be that service centric and neglect manufacturing. And those who, I've been very blunt about it. Those who do down manufacturing, they are actually damaging this country's strategic future. That we cannot build the deep strengths. We cannot build the national security basic requirements unless we have, a significant industrial capacity. I know I'm saying this at Pune, which is very much at the heart of this culture. But I do think if there is a big China debate to be had in this country, it needs to be actually focused on what is it we should do to rectify what is clearly a very unsatisfactory state of affairs.
Thank you very much, all three ministers. We have run out of time, in fact, exceeded our time. So let me bring this inaugural session to an end. Please join me in applauding the three ministers. Thank you very much for your presence here in Pune. Also, as a token of our appreciation, we'll be gifting you a book by the Pune International Center on how India should approach the China challenge, how India should approach the China question. I hope the government does take some of these suggestions on board. But thank you very much, all three ministers. Thank you for being with us. I'll just request them to bring in the gifts. Hello. Finally, we have to have a group photo here of all the speakers. May I invite the President of the PIC, Dr. Mashelkar, the Vice President, Dr. Kelkar, to join us on stage for this group photo. And thank you for being with us.
Thank you very much, Honorable Ministers and Ambassador Bambawale, for that most interesting and informative roundtable. I would also like to thank the audience for their pertinent questions. We now move into the second session this evening, which is a fireside chat hosted by Dr. Ganesh Natarajan, featuring Mr. Narayan Murthy. Dr. Natarajan is trustee of the Pune International Center and executive chairman and founder of the 5F World. Mr. Murthy is founder of Infosys, a leading Indian IT company and a global leader in next generational digital services and consulting. They will be talking about technology and talent for global success. I welcome Mr. Murthy and Dr. Natarajan to the stage, please.
Well, good evening to all of you, and what a pleasure. And this is going to be a session with a difference, because I am going to give a lot of opportunity for many of you, all of you, who have either heard of Mr. Narayan Murthy or, of course, heard Mr. Narayan Murthy before, because he is quite simply the most knowledgeable and eloquent person I know. So I really want to give many of you a chance to ask whatever questions you have. But let me first start with a interesting point. This is probably the third time in the last 1 year that I've had this opportunity to have a conversation with Mr. Murthy. One is, of course, for a web series that we were running on influencers and India makers, if you will, where I had the opportunity to interview Mr. Murthy on video. And after that, of course, this afternoon we had lunch ostensibly to discuss this panel. And I think we ended up discussing everything else. So finally, we will discuss this panel in the panel. And third, of course, is this one. So it's an absolute privilege for me. And thank you, Dr. Mashelkar. Thank you, Dr. Kelkar. And of course, thank you, Gautam, for giving us a chance to do this. The way we're going to structure it is we're going to talk a little bit about what you heard, which is the whole aspect of India. We will talk about something that made India shine, which is of course, the technology industry from this country, and more specifically, Infosys, with all the values that Infosys itself and Mr. Narayan Murthy himself stands for. We'll talk about two key differentiators or determinants of what could well be India's decade and Asia's century, as many of us say, which is technology and talent. And then we'll end with a discussion on what kind of culture do we need to see in this country to make stuff happen. So that's the 5 topics we'll touch upon. And of course, then we'll throw it open for any questions you may have on pretty much any topic. But just a very quick personal introduction. I mean, you saw the 2 books of Pune International Center, which are the last 2 books being gifted to the ministers. And I had the privilege, thanks to Dr. Mashelkar and Dr. Kelkar, of editing the last book along with Ijaz Ghani from the World Bank. And I remember we were just finishing the book, and I think this was towards October end or something like that. And suddenly our publisher, Rupa Publishers, they said, look, we need a forward from somebody of significance. And we had a quick discussion amongst the PIC leadership team. And the first name that came to our head was, of course, Narayan Murthy. And I remember I asked Rupa, how much time do we have? And they said, can we get this done in 10 days' time? So with great trepidation, I actually wrote a mail to Mr. Murthy and said, Mr. Murthy, can you give us this forward? Doesn't matter, it can be short, it can be just a few words, a few lines, few paragraphs. And can you give this to us? And he said, when do you need it? I said, within a month. And he said, impossible, I'm traveling and I mean, it'll take me whatever time it takes and you don't need to wait. So the publisher wrote back and said, should we look for somebody else? I said, I know Mr. Murthy, so you don't need to worry about anybody else. Sure enough, within 24 hours, I get a call from Mr. Murthy saying, I'm sitting in an airport in France, and what is it you want me to write about? So I told him about the book, etc., etc. So he said, I'll do it. Within 48 hours, we had the first version of one of the most outstanding forewords you will ever see. I was telling Mr. Murthy at lunch that I've done 4 of these book talks so far, and we have 6 more to go. And most people who have bought the book, like most people who buy books, have certainly read the foreword and maybe half the first chapter. So all of them, the first question is always about Mr. Narayan Murthy's foreword. I'm saying we should have made him write the back part and not the front part, but who knows? Okay. And Mr. Murthy, of course, as I said, is probably one of the most passionate leaders I know. So, Mr. Murthy, I'm going to start with asking you a question. What makes Narayan Murthy Narayan Murthy?
No, first of all, let me thank you, Prashant, Ramesh, Vijay, and others for inviting me to be here. Of course, you are known as the most dynamic statesman of NASCOM. So you and Ramesh are always optimistic and always see the glass half full. So it's an absolute pleasure. Well, that question is somewhat difficult to answer because it is for other people to say what I am. And the question you asked in some ways, right? What is it that makes me whatever I appear to be? I hope I am genuine. I think it is that the first thing that my parents taught me is to be humble, because there are so many students much smarter than me in both my undergraduate and graduate studies. 13 companies were started between 1979 and 1982, and we founded Infosys on 7th of July, 1981. There's only one company that has reached where it has today. But the founders of other companies, in my analysis, some of them were much smarter than what we as a team were. So the lesson that my mother and father ingrained in me, that is to try to be as humble as possible, has stood me very well, because I am the last person to say India is the greatest, we have nothing to learn, we are this, we are that. I think that is not the kind of talk I would do. Second, I have learned from my boss at IIM Ahmedabad, Professor Krishnaya, whom I met last night. The idea of deciding every issue based on data and facts, and to start every transaction on a zero base. I think this is extremely important if you want to work in a team of 7 people. When we founded, I invited 6 of my younger colleagues. They were about 11 years younger than me. I was the general manager, head of software, and most of them I had recruited as trainees, including Nandan, Chris, everybody. But I also realized that if we have to stay together, we have to create trust in each other. And that trust will come only if the other party says, this guy is not biased against me. And this guy will judge every transaction on its merit. And that judging every transaction on merit requires you to judge everything based on data and facts. That is the second principle that we have all followed. The third issue is that, as I said before, in some way, I think that whatever success Infosys has achieved is partly due to the luck. We were in the right place at the right time. Of course, we did all that is required of us, hard work, reasonable thinking, all of that. But in spite of all of that, you need God's blessings. That's something that we have all practiced. Fourth, we realized that if you want innovation to flourish in your company, you have to treat every employee in the company with respect and dignity. The moment you treat every employee with respect and dignity, they enjoy coming to the office. They have no fear to suggest an idea. They will argue out if somebody makes an idea that's not very good. So a few of these things that we have all followed, and I think in some sense, this is really what makes Infosys, more than me, a company that has come this far.
So, Mr. Murthy, there are two quotes from you which have become folklore in the industry. The second one I'll come back to later, but the first one was, "In God we trust, the rest bring data." So I think you've articulated that extremely well, especially in an era where you get so much hype and no substance across social media. So I think that's a very important lesson for all of us. Question to you, sir. I mean, you came back, from France, and there was an interesting passage from there to here. And maybe can you tell us a little bit about the India you saw when you came back from France? And over the last few decades, you've been here and of course, building Infosys and so many other institutions. What are the changes you've seen in India that make us hopefully today a much more confident nation?
Well, when I came back from France, because I said I would be more useful in my country than in France, I saw a few good things and a few not so good things. Of course, the few good things was I came to Pune and I met a girl who later on became my wife. That's a big thing. Absolutely, that's a big plus. I also started to work with my former boss, Professor Krishnaya here, in a think tank. And I learned a lot from him, absolutely a lot. So at the same time, I realized that the outside world did not think much of India. Whenever something was shown about India, whether it was France, Germany, UK, etc., and I used to travel to all these countries as part of my work, they would show it as a land of filth, land of poverty, etc. Nobody spoke about our excellent higher educational institutions, the power of our youth, etc. Second, when I came back, in some way, I started seeing the country with the eyes of the foreigners. Why did they say that? I realized in some way that they were not completely wrong. And therefore, I said, look, the only way India can become a better country, the only way India can become a more prosperous country is through the power of entrepreneurship, is through the power of converting ideas into jobs and wealth. And that was a big transformation that happened to me while I was in France, Paris, and then while I was traveling abroad.
So I also found at that point of time, Mrs. Gandhi was the prime minister. And due to a set of factors, there was a focus on doing everything from India. Imports were difficult. So therefore, the quality of goods that we saw in the country was shoddy. But I can go on and on, but on the other hand, today, I see considerable confidence amongst youngsters. That is the most visible thing I find, whether I'm in Pune, whether I'm in Bangalore, Mumbai, Delhi, whatever it is. There is a can-do spirit. This morning, I addressed the students of Symbiosis, and most of the questions were about entrepreneurship. This didn't happen 20 years ago. There is a high level of confidence in the people in the country. There is great hope that we will indeed reach the $5 trillion and move much more forward. The thanks to the Indian origin entrepreneurs in the Silicon Valley and the large number of Indian professors in US University, there is a newfound respect for India in the Western nations. That these are all not idiots. There are a lot of smart people in this country, and they can be very, very valuable in our enterprises. And there, India has participated in very important positions in multilateral institutions. Right now, we are all celebrating the presidency of G20. So I think once there is an air of confidence, once there is an air of aspiration, once there is an air of hope, I can tell you, you know it, Ganesh, I don't need to tell you because you're one of those people. We can solve any problem. So that is the current environment in India. We may still have poverty. We may still have certain problems in infrastructure, but that desire to change those lacunae exists in the country today. We are not apathetic. We are not overcome by those lacunae. We have, now the youngsters are saying, we will overcome and remove those obstacles. That's what I find.
No, that's very interesting, sir, because in the research we did for this book, India's Pathways to Success, obviously the negatives or the problems, if you will, all of us know. There are still issues on health and infanticide and so many other things. We also have problems on a very consumption-driven rather than an investment-driven economy, of course, which we all know as compared to China's huge success story in FDI, which of course is changing at this point of time. And thanks to PLIs, as Minister Jaishankar was saying, surely that will change as well. But we also found what you said was probably coming up topmost in terms of the new level of confidence, or as Dr. Mashelkar likes to say, dangerous optimism that we see in so many people in the country, which is so important. And the other thing that we found was that something we're very proud of is still what we achieved, not so far in the $5 trillion goal, but in the $1 trillion goal for digital India. And your own colleague Nandan with his, Aadhaar and the whole JAM Trinity, Jandhan, Aadhaar, mobility. And I think what we are seeing particularly with UPI, and I think Minister Jaishankar actually spoke about it in a TV interview where he was talking about his own use of payment systems being so much more advanced. than younger people in the US, for instance. So do you see, I mean, we've already seen technology as a big enabler of the India story. I remember my wife Uma and I were in Alaska about 15 years ago, and we got off on a little island on the cruise called Ketchikan. And the boatman, who had never left the island of Ketchikan in his life, looked at both of us and looked at us and say, "Oh, India, computers." And we were so proud, that at least something that people know us for, and not the Indian rope trick and all the things of yore. So do you think technology can be a big differentiator even going forward, that we can take the UPI success story and make it across multiple platforms for SMEs and various things? Is that one scenario that you could paint for India?
Well, science is about unraveling the nature. It is about understanding the complexity of nature and simplifying it. On the other hand, technology is about using science to make life more comfortable, better, to reduce cost, to improve productivity, to reduce cycle time, to bring more comfort, more entertainment, etc., etc. But there is one aspect of technology which is more important than all these for a poor country like India. I hope people won't get upset if I say India is a poor country, because let's remember that we are about $2,000 per capita. So we have to keep that in mind. If we don't remember our problems, we will never be able to solve it. And that issue is technology is a great leveler. What do I mean by that? Let me tell you a story. The first ATM on our campus in Bangalore was installed almost 30 years ago, in 1994. And, we had this culture of all of us eating together, whether you are a janitor or whether you're the CEO, it didn't matter to us. So I was standing behind one of the janitors in the queue at our canteen, and I asked him in Kannada, in my mother tongue, we have installed this new machine called ATM. Do you like it? His eyes lit up. Oh, yes, I very much like it. It's so good. It's fantastic. So I said, what is it that you find unique about this ATM? And he said, sir, when you had the bank teller, when you had the bank branch, when I went to the teller, he would not give me attention, but he would give attention to all the suited, booted youngsters who had come with the latest gizmo from the US, and I had to wait. But sir, you go to this ATM, whether I go or you go, it gives the money within the same time and with the same respect. And that's what I am extremely excited about, that ATM. It doesn't happen with human beings, but that machine does not create any differentiation between you, the CEO, and me, the janitor. That's exactly what he told me in Kannada. So therefore, technology is extremely important for a nation like India, because as I told you earlier, it raises the confidence of people. And the most important ingredient for us to solve the problem is confidence. And again, as I said before, while we continue to have a lot of problems around us, there is a newfound confidence amongst people, particularly the youngsters, that we can indeed overcome these problems. So technology raises the confidence. It's a great leveler. It doesn't distinguish who you are, whether you are the prime minister or whether you are a bureaucrat or whether you are a private sector person, janitor, chairman, etc. That's the beauty. So therefore, technology has a great value in a country like India. And of course, there are various other things, what the UPI has done, financial inclusion, I mean, it has reduced it has eliminated the problem of time. You can, sit at your house in the night and order whatever you want on Amazon, you get it. So there are a lot of others. I don't want to get into it, but at the highest level, technology has raised the confidence of the poorest Indian. That is its biggest contribution.
So just to peel the onion a little on technology, because I mean, we've all seen in the last 2 years so much of digital technology coming. And today I was reading in one of the newspapers that $590 billion of new value will be created just by the country going digital. Now that's, I have to research it to see where it came from, but it's interesting. But if you take, I mean, the early digital technologies like social, mobility, cloud, etc., and then we move to so many newer technologies like augmented reality, virtual reality, AI. Today we are talking about generative AI and chat GPT and what have you. So there's one technology that you think can really make all our lagging sectors. Minister Jayashankar mentioned manufacturing, which clearly we all agree. So manufacturing, agriculture, and not just services. Something that is really important for India, what would you say? Is there any one technology that you can think of?
Ganesh, you named so many technologies: AI, machine learning, deep learning, cloud, uh, chat GPT and others. But the one that I am very hopeful will add value to our country is IoT, Internet of Things. Why do I say IoT is the most valuable technology for India? And that is because IoT brings the power of computing to other branches of technology, other branches of engineering. It will make agricultural machines more productive. It will make the use of water more efficient. It will make, it will make banking transactions better. It will make steel production more efficient. I mean, it will make cars consume fuel more efficiently. There are hundreds of things that I can say. In other words, IoT will insert itself in the value chain, in agricultural area, in manufacturing area, in other services area, in government functioning, you name it. In every area of our life, IoT has a value to improve productivity, reduce cycle time, bring better value to us. It will bring to farmers, it will bring to factory workers, it will bring to teachers, you name it. So I would say that while AI, chat GPT, all of them are going to be very useful, but they are what I would term assistive technologies. They are assistive in the sense that they will make you more productive. However, they will make you more productive only in that area. On the other hand, IoT has the power to make so many sectors of our economy more productive. So I am very, very positive about IoT. We have still not used IoT very efficiently in many areas of our economy. And I hope we do that, because that's when we will make the lives of the poor even better.
That's very true, Mr. Murthy. And today, if you look at the other big enabler that we said we should talk about, which is talent. I mean, we all are very proud of our demographic dividend. We know that we have such a large group of young people, all with aspirations, technologically skilled, etc. But I want to touch upon one question, and you and I have discussed this very often, that are values eroding in the talent ecosystem? The reason I ask is, I remember November of 2021, my wife and I were in Ladakh for a 10-day holiday. And on top of the Lama Yuru monastery, which is one of the tallest monasteries there, 11:30 in the morning, we met this young woman who works for a company that you know very well, which I shall not name. But so we were talking to her and said, how long have you been in Ladakh? And she said, I've been here for 6 weeks. So we said, where do you work? And she said, look, I'm from Odisha, but I work in Bangalore in this company. And we said, 6 weeks, your company gives you a lot of leave? She says, no, I'm working. So we said, what does that mean? She says, I get up in the morning in my hotel, 8:30, I switch on my computer. She's doing a managed services contract. And she says, if there's any ticket that comes on my computer, I get an indicator on my mobile. I'll call up my friend in Bangalore and she'll fix it for me. So I'm on holiday, but I'm working. So we were like thinking already. And then next week I was in Bangalore and I met another young person. And I asked him, so he's saying, I'm so happy nowadays. You know, my earning has now gone up from 15 lakhs per year to 45 lakhs. I said, what happened? Did you change your job? He says, no, I'm still working for that company. I'm working for another company full time. And I'm working for 2 startups part time. And he had 3 computers in front of him. So I asked him, look, is there something called ethics in your system? And he says, no, uncle, ethics for me means not getting caught. What's your view, sir?
Well, it is a rather provoking question. And you are a good friend, so I have to be honest with you. I think this whole issue of moonlighting, this whole issue of saying I will attend the office 3 days a week, should not be the way young Indians should behave at this point of time, because for the first time in the history of India in the last 300 years, India has tasted some success, not total success. And we therefore have to consolidate on the little success that we have achieved and aim for bigger success. And I don't know of any country in the world, and I have visited probably 100 plus countries in the world. I don't know of any country in the world which has enhanced its prosperity, which has enhanced its economic power, which has earned the respect of the world without working hard. Therefore, my humble request to all the youngsters is, this is your time. We have ceded the stage onto you. We are elders, we are old people, we are cheering you on the sidelines. You're running this marathon. For heaven's sake, don't give up on this extraordinary opportunity. Ramesh and I didn't get that opportunity in the 60s. You know, at that time, there were very few jobs. Getting a job was very difficult. And as I already told you, the outside world thought India was a land of filth and poverty. But today, there is a certain newfound respect. Please consolidate that. Please try and improve the success of India. And for you to do that, you have to work hard. And you have to have a certain value system. One thing I have realized, and that is, whenever I go to a country that has reached a certain level of prosperity, I find that the level of honesty, the level of work ethic, the level of discipline, the level of pride in the nation is much higher than a country which has not achieved that level of prosperity. I'm sure all of you will agree with me. Therefore, my fervent desire and humble request to youngsters is, please don't fall into this trap of, I will moonlight, I will work from home, I'll come to the office 3 days a week. Folks, the future of the country is on your shoulders. We're all old. I mean, I am 77. Ramesh is 78. Our time is over. Now, this is your time. You have to run this marathon with tremendous weight on your shoulder. You have a huge responsibility. So please don't fall into this trap. You may have a little bit of comfort in saying that I'll work 3 days a week. You may get a little bit more money by saying I will, do moonlighting. That will not go very far. I want to ask another question of all these wonderful youngsters. Which parent in the world, don't worry about the nation, whether it is Brazil or India or US or Singapore or Australia, where in the world have the parents told their children not to work hard, not to be disciplined, not to have a good work? Nowhere, nowhere. I have found, I'm sorry to say, even the worst politician that I know of, I have heard him tell his children, beta kaam karo, beta aage badho, beta have good values. So therefore, anybody who has told you that ethics are not important, anybody who has told you that laziness is good, I think they are not your well-wishers. And most importantly, the nation's future is on your shoulders. You want your children to become better than you, and you will tell your children tomorrow, beta, work hard, beta, be disciplined. So if you are not disciplined, it won't happen. It will simply not happen. I'll just tell a story if you don't mind. I believe there was a man, he was married, his wife was there, and they had a small child. And the wife was very upset with the father-in-law. He had an old father, the man of the house. And she used to get upset with him every day. And one day this man got upset and he said, look, tomorrow morning, I'm going to bury my father alive. She said, okay, I will prepare breakfast for you early. So all of that. So in the morning, he got up, his father got up, they had some breakfast or something. And then the small child said, Papa, I want to come with you to the forest. I said, okay, come. So 3 of you went to the middle of the forest, and the man told his father and his son, please wait here. I'm going to dig a hole. So he started digging a hole. And the child went to him, and the child asked the father, Papa, why are you digging this hole? And the man said, I want to bury my father. Child, oh, is that so? Fine. So after some time, the man saw his small son digging another hole. So he asked, beta, tum kya kar rahe ho? What are you doing? He said, you want to bury your father, I want to bury you. So the point I'm making is all these wonderful youngsters on whom the future of the country depends, you people cannot do anything wrong because your child also would want to do that. Therefore, kindly embrace good values and you will all make the nation proud. You'll all make all of us proud. Sorry, I went too long on this because this is a favorite topic of mine.
No, no, absolutely, sir. In fact, my next and last formal question to you is also on that theme. But so any of you who have questions, that your time will come in a couple of minutes. Yeah, I'm coming to you. So, but just think of your question. So the last point is, I mean, the second quote that I said I will quote back to you, which is something that you call MAFA, mistaking articulation for action. Okay, I love that line. Okay. And Mr. Murthy, I mean, today, if you hear the rhetoric that comes at you from television screens and everywhere else, and there are policies for everything and pronouncements for everything and predictions for everything. So what do you think if you have really to be successful as Asia, as of course, India, what is the kind of culture that we should have in the country going forward? You've written about it in the forward to our book, but just wanted you to articulate it because it's such a powerful message that you give on culture.
You know, this MOFA was, I learned that MOFA thing from Wagul, who used to be the chairman of ICICI, mistaking articulation for action. I think we Indians are very good at that. Anyway, now, while on the one hand, there is a small section of India which works hard, which is honest, which has good work ethic, all the discipline, all of that. By and large, this is not the predominant nature of a developing country like India. While in the majority or a large part of the country somehow has not created a culture that is conducive to fulfilling the aspirations of our Prime Minister. And in order to do that, we have to create a culture of honesty, discipline, high aspirations, good work ethic, transparency, accountability, etc., etc. Now, that these characteristics are lacking in certain sections of the country. I don't need to expand on that. And let me give you a simple example. I hope nobody will think I'm anti-national if I say this. You know, when we went to China, Jaishankar was the ambassador. It was 2006. And the mayor of Shanghai invited me to his house for breakfast. I went, a brilliant, very well-maintained house, extremely sophisticated. And he spoke to me through an interpreter, obviously. Either he didn't want to show his English or he had tried in his language, whatever it is, very, very easy communication. And he asked me, what do you want? I said, look, we want to start with at least 25 acres of land in a very prestigious locality. He said, we know all of that. I have already told my officers. Today, they will take you to 3 places in Pudong. And you choose which one you want. And we will give you the allotment letter by tomorrow evening, 5 p.m. latest. I didn't believe that because I had heard such from so many state governments here. I was a little bit surprised. But anyway, his officers took me around and I chose one, very wonderful piece of land. And believe it or not, by 4 p.m., we got the letter of allotment. I want anybody here to tell me whether they got such, such speedy stuff here in our country. Even Dr. Jaishankar spoke about, no, don't go there. You should do everything here. We all want to. Business people want to do everything in India. We are no less patriots than anybody else. Let me make that very clear. I mean, I returned from France from a very good job, in 1974, because I wanted to do whatever little I could do for India. So it is not that we are not patriotic. It is just that decisions, for whatever reason, I don't know how government works, decision takes time in our country. And at the lower level, while at the higher level, people are very honest, but speed is not the strength of, our people. At the lower level, everybody tells me, now of course I am retired, so I don't go to an office. Everybody tells me that there is corruption. So when the reality is that if we want all business people to stay only in India and do everything in India, I think they will be very happy to do. All that we are respectfully requesting is that quick decisions must be taken. They must be implemented quickly, and there should be no harassment. There should be no unnecessary hurdle. And our Prime Minister is trying very hard. Absolutely no doubt about it. I think we all salute his wishes, his hard work, all of that. But that is not reflected at the ground level. If we can do that, I think everybody will stay. Why would anybody want to go outside? So anyway, so we need to build a culture of quick decision making, quick implementation, hassle-less transactions, honesty in transactions, no favoritism. If those things become part of our culture, that's what I've seen in most developed countries. Unfortunately, that's the reality. Whether we may agree, disagree, that's the reality. Because I have traveled to about 100 countries and I have spent reasonable time in some of these countries. I find that as the major difference between our country and those countries. As a patriotic Indian, my fervent appeal is for all the people to make India too a country with such a culture. Then let me tell you, economic growth, everything will be very fast. I mean, we must ask a question. While China may not be our greatest friend at this time, but there is a lot we can learn from China. We have to ask this question. Why is it that China and India, which were very similar to each other in 1978, why is it that China is now somewhere around 6 times our economy? I think we have to have a debate here. We have to have open discussion. We have to look at data and facts. And we should say, we will do better than the Chinese what China has done, what Chinese have done. Then I can tell you, we will grow faster, we will grow more than China, we'll overcome China, we'll overcome US, every country. That's much. So culture is the most important ingredient for the success of a country. And once we focus on creating such a culture, I believe that economic growth will be child's play. Of course, there will be business cycles. Sometimes we'll not grow fast, all of that will happen. But that's basic economic. I mean, Vijay and Ajay, they all are expert. They can explain that. But in normal terms, we will grow very fast and our country will become more prosperous than what we want. That's what I would say. So my suggestion, my request is that we, all the leaders, whether they're in the corporate world, whether in academia or government, no matter what area it is, we must lead by example in creating a culture in our organization of leadership by example in these good values. Then the rest is all child's play. That's my view.
No, that's great, Mr. Murthy, because in the previous book that we wrote on facing up to the India challenge, where Gautam, of course, talked about the diplomatic response to China, and we have two of our star economists, Dr. Ranade and of course, Professor Shah with Vijay Kelkar, talking about exactly what you said. What is that economic response, which is probably the better way of dealing with China? I think that those are some of the very interesting points that you made, which we came up with. Okay, I've borrowed, yeah.
I'll tell you, I must make one point
Yeah,
here. In 1976, my then girlfriend, now my wife, Sudha, she said, look, this evening we'll go and listen to Mr. Rahul Bajaj. He was about 37, 38, I think at that time, or maybe 40. He's a remarkable speaker. And we went and saw, we were very impressed. And he told about all the youngsters in the Maidan, they said, we want scooter, we want scooter. He said, what can I do? The government has put restrictions on how many scooters I can produce. Anyway, so later on I met Rahul and I said, Rahulji, what management book do you advise me to read? He said, I want to be frank with you because you appear fairly sincere. He said, look at the competition. You will learn all that is written in any management book. Look at the competition, see what they are doing, start doing what they're doing, and then you will automatically invent new ways and, new practices, and you will overtake them. So I think while whatever may be our position, I am just a simple citizen, so I am nobody to say anything. We need to look at all the countries in the world, or at least the major countries, and learn what is it that they are doing and become and adapt those practices here, and then create our own new practices so that we become the leaders in those practices. Sorry,
No, absolutely, sir. I mean, in fact, that's been a fascinating. I think I've borrowed 10 minutes from Gautam, so we have time for 3-4 questions. So anybody, yes, sir, please. Can you get some mics there, please? Yeah, and like we did last time, let's get all the 3 questions and then we'll get Mr. Murthy to respond and close. Yeah, go ahead. Just say who you are, sir, and your question. Sorry, that mic is not working. And the mic has been programmed to explode in 30 seconds, so you'll have to do it fast.
Yeah, Ashok Kaushal really from Pune only, Pune Internship Center. Just extending your thought really, when you mentioned the nation's future is on your shoulder, we have seen it during the inauguration, the common thread being the concern for the climate change. Should we extend that the Earth's future is on your shoulders?
No, what was the question on climate change? The last point you made?
Mainly for the youth really, inviting the Earth's future is on your shoulder. So just inviting the youth to take that bigger responsibility, contributing.
So you're saying the Earth's, you're saying the Earth's future is on your shoulders. So can youth participate in the whole climate and sustainability movement?
Well, first of all, as I told you, I am 77. I really don't have the energy that is needed to take up these mammoth tasks. On the other hand, and I also retired from all my stuff. On the other hand, I found that emphasis was built by youngsters. Even though we reaped the benefit, it was primarily built by a large number of youngsters with innovative ideas, great hard work, all of that. So therefore, I believe that we will cheer you from the sidelines. We will support you. We'll give you a glass of water as you're running this marathon. But you have the responsibility to build the India of your aspirations. I want to tell you another story. Sorry, I like an old man who keeps on telling stories. I have become like that. Once a Polish young man, not once, a Polish young man was immigrating to the US. Later on, he became a famous author. So on the ship, talking of 1929 or so, on the ship, everybody was saying, oh, US is great, New York is great. Oh, streets of New York are paved with gold. This will happen. You will become rich, all of that. So he writes in the second paragraph, when I landed at Ellis Island, those days there were no airports and all of that. Ellis Island was the area where all the ships docked and they had to get off the ships there. He says, I learned three things. One, the streets of New York were not paved with gold, number one. Second, the streets of New York were not paved at all. That was the second truth. Third, I was invited to pave the streets of New York. So therefore, just as that famous Polish author wrote, the task of inevitably in the hands of the youngsters. The elders will give advice, they will judge whether, the route or the path we are taking is okay or not. All of that can happen. But the primary mental and physical energy will have to come from youngsters. So I would say that, once again, I would humbly request all the youngsters to realize that they have an extraordinarily aspirational responsibility of fulfilling the dreams of the founding fathers of this nation. That is to ensure that the poorest child in the remotest village in the country had decent education, decent nutrition, decent shelter, decent health care, and hope for a better future for itself and its progenies. That was the dream of Jawaharlal Nehru, Rajendra Prasad, Sardar Patel, Mahatma Gandhi, many, and all the Rajgopalachari, all the, Govind Vallabh Pant, many people who fought for our freedom. Therefore, you have got that extraordinary opportunity. Please don't throw it to the wind. Seize that opportunity. Very rarely such opportunities come. We didn't have that. Ramesh didn't have it when we were young, but you have got it today. So please take it as an opportunity that will not come to every generation, and work hard and show good work ethic, be disciplined, be honest, and make it a reality.
So while I'm tempted to close on that very inspiring note, I'm going to take one last question, but
I'm here, Ganesh.
I need it from a lady, please. We need to get some gender balance in this whole. Yeah. Yeah, go ahead, go ahead.
If there is any other person, any other lady wants to take the question.
You can go ahead, Uma.
Okay. Mr. Murthy, it was truly enthralling to listen to you. I have this question about the fact that democratization of education, something that India has been trying to do, is extremely positive step in the right direction. However, what we are also finding is the creamy layer, which probably organizations like Infosys and others had the opportunity to attract. That is probably not happening, but organizations like Infosys have got robust processes in place because of which you are able to turn the talent into gold. However, if you look at other professions like chartered accountancy, medicine, engineering, and so on and so forth, despite democratization of education, the quality of talent that we are getting today, while the economy is expanding, seems to be not of the caliber, although it was limited in supply in the early days.
Well,
So,
I think
what is your view to change this phenomenon?
no, that's a very important comment and very important point of view. You know, very early in the game at Infosys, I realized that education and research is extremely important. If Infosys was to grow, at that time we were probably $1 million or something, from $1 million to about $17 billion today. Therefore, we hired a professor of information system from IIM Calcutta. And we sat down and convinced him why he should leave IIM Calcutta and come to a piddly company called Infosys, operating out of a house in Jayanagar, and why we all believed in education. I don't know if you've seen, we have built the world's largest corporate training center. Nowhere in the world, nowhere else in the world is there such a place. We can train about 30,000 engineers every year. I mean, in other words, we have 15,000 single bedroom, single bed rooms. You can work 24 hours a day because it's all safe, all of that. I think it all depends upon the priorities of the top management. We said we will make a little bit less profit in the short term and spend it on education, because I knew that it will lead to much better margins. I don't know how many of you know, at least till I retired, Infosys had the highest margin amongst all software companies. The year I left my CEO-ship at the age of 55, we had a 31% net income margin, that is profit after tax. So the point I'm making is, it is the responsibility of the leaders of these companies to realize that short-term sacrifice will lead to long-term benefits. That is what is also called deferred gratification. I think it is the view of the individual companies, the senior management of individual companies, and I mean, there's a democracy, so, I mean, it is for them to do whatever they want. But I can tell you one thing, that if you established a very sound education and training program, you will reap the benefits, many, many times. Just as if you focus on quality, it will appear like in the short term, it's going to cost you some money, but in the medium and long term, you will be very profitable.
Whenever I finish a conversation with Mr. Narayan Murthy, I always am reminded of Swami Vivekananda's very famous words: arise, awake, and stop not till the goal is reached. And this is absolutely a call to action. So thank you very much, Mr. Murthy, for giving us this very inspiring hour of your time. And I'm sure this is a fantastic way to end day one of this edition of Asia Economic Dialogue. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Murthy and Dr. Natarajan, for this very open, engaging, and warm discussion. May I please request Dr. Natarajan to present Mr. Murthy with a token of appreciation on behalf of PIC. May I also request our chair and distinguished speaker to please stay back for a photograph, and may I call upon PIC's President, Dr. Mashelkar, Vice President, Dr. Kelkar, and the conference convener, Dr. Ambassador Gautam Bambawale, please to the stage for a group photo. Thank you. Thank you. This concludes the proceedings on day one of the Asia Economic Forum, Asia Economic Dialogue 2023. I want to extend thanks on behalf of PIC to all of our speakers and guests who joined us here today. Day two of AED 2023 begins at 10 a.m. tomorrow morning. We look forward to welcoming you back here and all others that may join us tomorrow and on day three as well. Thank you. Wishing you a pleasant evening ahead.